Hi, I'm Dr. Jamil Sayed, and on this podcast, we're going to talk about some deep stuff. I'm here to tell you that you're amazing, and often, the only person who can't see that is you. No matter who you are, what you do, or where you're from, there's greatness in you. Let's talk about it. Hey everyone, I'm Dr. Jamil Sayed, and welcome to the Transformation Starts Today podcast, where I interview leaders, champions, and high performers from all walks of life as they share their story, the lessons they've learned along the way, and empowering perspectives to help you create an extraordinary life without regret, starting today. Today we have with us Thomas Wurm. Thomas Wurm is a visionary healer and entrepreneur with a unique background that blends 15 years of wildland fire service with his expertise in alternative healing. As the founder of Mountain Mind Tricks, he has dedicated his life to empowering others on their healing journeys. He provides breakthrough sessions and sacred energy healing with integration to help clients heal their mind, body, and spirit. Thomas believes that everyone possesses the natural ability to heal from anything, and his holistic approach releases the root cause in the mind so the body can heal. Thomas, I've been really looking forward to this conversation. Welcome to the show.
Yes, thank you so much for having me. Thank you to all the listeners here. I'm just excited. I'm just excited to jam with you today, man.
Yeah, man, it's been such a privilege getting to know you. For our listeners, Thomas and I met in Hawaii as part of our energy healing training. And it's just been such a wonderful friendship, brotherhood, just an unfolding. And we both share such a passion for helping people to heal physically, emotionally, mentally, spiritually, and getting to just have our conversations over the last several years, and also getting to be here now to dive deeper and to share this conversation with others. It's going to be a great time.
Yes.
And so I'd love to begin for our listeners who they don't know you yet. Can you please share your story, what you've been through, how you got to where you are now, and why you do what you do?
Yeah, thank you, Jamil. I think I got to start back a little bit. We got to go back a little ways because I've had a pretty interesting life. I've been through a lot of things. And, when I look at my teenage years as a teenager, there was a lot of struggle for me. There was a lot of deep seated anger that really came to a boiling point. And one of the things that, to me during my high school years, it was just I started hanging out with the wrong crowds, and doing the wrong things. And I ended up having a near death experience around 15. And this really changed everything for me. This opened me up to consciousness, really. I went from really basically failing school completely to all of a sudden I was getting 4.0s. I was reading 3 4 books a week on Buddhism, on Taoism, on consciousness and meditation. Like this near death experience was so interesting because it was a nothingness, a void experience. And so I was so curious, like, what happened to me? And actually, for the longest time, I thought I didn't think it was an NDE because there was nothing. I was like, maybe I just blacked out or something. I don't know. But then when I started reading like Raymond Moody's work and seeing the statistics on near death experiences, and I saw how people's lives changed like overnight, I was like, oh, that was me.
Hmm.
Wow. Okay. Now it really helped me understand. And so that really opened me up. And I would say I fell back asleep actually later when I was about 18. I went into firefighting. So, I was in wildland fire for, 15 years. So that was an amazing journey, insanely hard. I still can't believe I did it for so long, honestly. There's just so much physical stress, mental, emotional stress. It's just an amazing, powerful process. And one of the things that opened me up as a firefighter is one, being in nature so much, right? Being in nature so much. I was beginning to have experiences of talking to trees or even talking to the fire or understanding my environment. We have something called situational awareness in firefighting. It's like keeping your head on a swivel, like you never know what's going to happen. But I started taking that awareness to the next level, I think. And it was just kind of starting when my best friend, my captain, passed away suddenly. I think it was around 2015. And this event was, I remember when I heard the news, I literally dropped to the ground. Like I collapsed in tear, like just sheer shock. So this was a huge event for me. I mean, this was absolutely life altering. Uh, and I went through a really intensive, basically PTSD reaction. I mean, I had severe grief, a lot of health issues, and just I got to the end of my rope in a lot of ways. And what really saved me was actually meditation, um, acupuncture, and really what turned the corner for me was mental emotion release. Like that was, I remember my master prac time. Like when I released fear for the first time, it was like I opened my eyes and was like, oh my God, this is it. This is the thing that I've been needing. So, and that's just been evolving. The During that time, I just found a passion for helping other people. Like I knew I really wanted to do it. And eventually I just kept evolving into, now I feel like I've really stepped into some gifts of seeing energy, of understanding energy, of helping people move energy. There's a lot of psychological and science-based aspects to what I do, but there's also, I guess, in a way, a lot of shamanic aspects to it as well, a lot of energy work. So, I think that's a quick nutshell of all the things, but if you want to dive deeper anywhere, I'm happy to.
Yeah, man, thank you so much for sharing everything that you shared. And I'm sure we're gonna come back to so much of it throughout our conversation. One of the things that you described NDE, so near death experiences for our listeners. Side note, if anyone's wanting to read a book about this that's really fun and entertaining but powerful, it's called God Took My Clothes. It's a great book, and I believe the author interviewed over 700 people who had the experience, and it's amazing the similarities, and it's a really cool book, so you might enjoy that. The next thing is for our listeners, you could hear Thomas's story. Any of you have been in this podcast for the long realm, what's the word? The long term. There we go. You heard my story in episode one. Wasn't a near death experience per se, but it was a wake up call. And we could look and listen to other people's experiences and think, well, I haven't had that experience. Or we can listen for what they're sharing and in a way shift our perspective to give ourselves the wake up call right now. So I have a question for all of our listeners I'm going to post to you that I really want you to be with. How much time do you have left? And when you really be with that question, you'll find that we all have the same answer. And the answer is, I don't know. And yet, how often are you putting off and procrastinating the things that you really say you want to do? The things that you say are most important to you? You say that a relationship, let's say, or a business or a travel experience or whatever is so important to you, but you don't live that way. And you tell yourself this, you can call it the lie, but it's like, I have time. I might have time, hopefully, but I don't know. And so, what if the wake up call is I'm alive right now and I might not be tomorrow? I'm alive right now and I might not be in 5 minutes. And so, where am I holding back? There's a question I pose to my clients all the time, and it applies to any aspect of your life. Whatever it is you're about to do, or whoever you're about to be with, what if this was the last time? Would that shift anything in how you show up? Would that shift how you speak to the person? Would it shift what you're willing to do and not willing to do? I promise you the answer is yes. So you can give yourself that near death experience in quotes, that wake up call. You could recognize that every day is your birthday because you go to sleep at night and you have no idea if you're going to wake up in the morning. Like you fall asleep, you kind of surrender to it with the hope that your eyes are going to open when you wake up, if you wake up. And when you do, there's this philosophy. I remember seeing this Wayne Dyer. So Dr. Wayne Dyer, he made a movie. It's called The Shift. You can watch it on YouTube for free. It's a really good movie. And he starts off the opening scene. He gets out of bed. It's probably 4 a.m. There's dark, a couple candles, and his first thing, thank you. It's his prayer. It's his mantra, to God, to the universe, to source. Thank you. I woke up today. That's a gift. What am I going to do with that? And so I really hope all of our listeners can hear in Thomas's share and in what I'm sharing now. You don't have to wait to have an experience like hit you in the face like that. You can give yourself your version of that wake up call right now. by creating a sense of urgency in your life, by creating the sense of I'm alive right now. Let's make the most of it. Let's squeeze the juice from it. Let's bring in all the love, the light, the magic possible. So that's the first thing that I wanted to share. Um, Actually, no, that was everything. And so based on what everything you just shared, that was everything I wrote down. Anything you want to share in response, Thomas?
Wow, your words were hitting me. I could feel them, and yeah, I think, gosh, if I look back, I mean, yeah, that experience woke me up, but it took a lot. I got hit so many times with just serious accidents or physical things. I mean, it just wake up, Thomas. Wake up, Thomas. Are you gonna wake up yet? And so, yeah, it's so true. I love what you're saying there, man. And I think the more we can wake up, and sometimes we fall asleep and we don't even know it. We're walking around with the sleep, sleepwalking through life in so many ways. And so yeah, I totally agree. We don't need to be hit by a 2x4 to wake up. It's we're so blessed in this time to be able to just have like platforms like this to help us wake up.
Yeah. And with that, it
Yeah.
reminds me of my previous conversation on my podcast was we were talking about something different, but she said, the universe shakes us. And then I said to our audience, where are you resisting the shake? Where are you
Mm.
ignoring the shake? And so for all of our listeners, here you are, you're driving, you're walking, you're doing something and you're hearing us, or maybe you're on YouTube and you're watching this. You can use this right now as the opportunity to make a decision, to make a choice that I am going to shift the way I'm seeing the world and seeing my life and living. It could be that simple. You don't have to make it more complicated than that. And so, what if you tried that on? You could always go back to the way you lived before. What if you tried it on and gave yourself 1 hour of living this way, 1 week of living this way, and watch what changes? It's truly magical when that happens.
Oh, I love it. I love it.
Something that came from your bio, this idea that we all have the natural ability to heal from anything. And so I'd love it if you can first just share for us, what does healing mean to you? And then can you share, what is it that from your perspective, we can all heal, from anything. What does that look like for you? What does that mean to you?
Wow, it's a deep question. I think healing is, I think so often we're looking for the cure, right? We want it to be cured. We want it to be over. We want to get away from the pain or the illness or the disease, whatever it is. But to me, healing is actually a surrendering to the problem, like in a way of what's the lesson for me? What can I learn from this experience that's going to help me shift my thinking and my emotions so then I can heal my body? So to me, there's so many. I think it's pretty rare something's just physical. Like I don't even know. I don't even know if that's possible, honestly. I think it really starts in the mind. And so what I mean by we can heal from anything, it's a matter of changing our mindset, our beliefs, our emotions, and getting into, I guess the best way I can think of is divine alignment, or if you want to like talk about a science perspective, more of epigenetics of bringing our body back to that perfect health, that basic, like our DNA is imprinted with the possibility for perfect health. That's it. Anything that's not perfect health, there's something in the way of that. So healing is really learning the lesson. And I think something this came up the other day for me actually pretty recently. Like I was journaling something and it was like a solution, not a solution, but a solution. Like my soul is going to tell me what I need to learn, then I can overcome this thing. So I think it allows us to become in divine alignment. And of course, we have to follow up with the physical stuff. We've got to go to the doctors. We've got to go to the natural path. We've got to do the things at a physical level, but it's got to start in the mind and the body and in that process. And oftentimes it starts with our energy, actually. So energy, mind, and body. And when we work on all three of these pillars, we really can make a huge, powerful impact on our health, our mental health, whatever we want to call it.
Mm, absolutely. Something that's coming to mind with what you just shared. So for our listeners, if you're looking for the science behind what I'm about to share, you can find it in a book called The Holographic Universe by a guy named Michael Talbot. And so Thomas alluded to we have multiple bodies. Now, depending on the culture where this is coming from, some people say we have four, some people say like five, six. Regardless of how many, it's the same idea. And so we've got a spiritual body, we've got a mental body, an emotional body, and a physical body. But think about it almost like layers of an onion. And the physical body is that center, it's the grossest, it's the densest. And then outside of it, let's say you've got the emotional, outside of that, you have the mental, outside of that, you have the spiritual. Some other terms might be astral or what's the one? Etheric, all these kind of things. These are different names that different people use, but this is the point of what I'm trying to say. The outermost bodies, they call them the subtle bodies. And each body, as you get closer, it becomes, let's say, the blueprint for the one beneath it. So the spiritual body is the blueprint for the mental body. And then it bases it on it. And then the mental body is the blueprint for the emotional, and the emotional is the blueprint for the physical. So like Thomas was talking about, if you've had, let's say, a trauma in your life, you had some type of experience, I'm going to actually pause on that. If there's a condition you're dealing with and you weren't born with it, it developed because of the way your life unfolded. It developed because, like Thomas mentioned, epigenetics. So you have epigenetics and you have genetic. Epi is a prefix, it means above. And so when you think about epigenetics, these are the experiences that you have and the way you think about them, etc., that impact how the genes are read. And so it's not a you have a gene or you don't. You can have a gene, but that gene can be expressed in potentially thousands or tens of thousands of different ways. And the manifestation of the disease might only be one or two or a handful of those 1,000 or 10,000 expressions. So you can have the gene and not have the problem. Why? Because of the epigenetics, which is basically how you live your life. And so with that being said, if you've had a condition that you were born with, this could be someone has like a cleft lip as an example, or spina bifida or something like that. That's genetic. That's harder to fix. But if somebody was born perfectly healthy, 10 years old, perfectly healthy, 20 years old, perfectly healthy, now they're in their 40s and they develop some chronic disease, that's not genetic. Like you might have had a genetic predisposition to be a little bit less resilient. You might have been more susceptible to it, but that's not why you got it. You got it because life happened in a certain way. And in this example, let's imagine your physical symptoms have manifested in your 30s, your 40s, your 50s. There was an example of a woman that I worked with. She was 51, I believe, might have been mid 50s. But the purpose of the story, she had rheumatoid arthritis. So for anyone who's not sure what that is, think of it like an autoimmune inflammatory condition around the body, specifically in the joints. A lot of pain. And so she's had this since she was 20 years old. And I remember speaking to her. We were at a clinic, in Mexico, and I was doing some medical mission work, and I had a translator, and I'm listening to her story. I'm listening to what's going on, and she has the chart that's 6, 7 inches, wide or tall. And you sit there and you go, everything that we have at this clinic is donation based. It's all like volunteer. Like my resources here are limited. Everything I could give her, she's already gotten. And at best, it's palliative. It kind of supports the symptom, but it doesn't actually get to what's going on. So I decided to shift. And I said to her, may I ask you a question that may really help me help you, but it might be a little bit difficult to answer? And she said to me, sure. And I said, have you ever been abused? And she looked at me with this look of like, how do you know? And I said, would you mind telling me about it? And she tells me that her father abused her in every way you can imagine from 3 years old to about 20. And then I said, then what happened? Then she moved away. And as her father was abusing her from a young age, her father is saying things like, you deserve this and you had it coming and it's your fault and all these kind of things that are horrendous. But as Thomas and I know, and many of our audience members may know, your personality develops. And from 0 to 7, some people even say 0 to 3, your personality is developing. They call it the imprinting phase. And as it's developing, you're just becoming more of you, but the blueprint, the foundation is being set. The programming, from a computer metaphor, is being placed into the system. And that's the programming that, unless you change it, which we can get to in a little bit when Thomas mentioned mental and emotional release work, until you're aware of it and you can release it and shift it, that's driving you until you become aware of it. And so I said, what happened at 20? I moved away. And then what happened? Then my RA started, her rheumatoid arthritis. So the interesting thing that I find, it may or may not always be the case. I can't say, I'm not going to say always, but I find it often enough to be the case. Autoimmune, you're attacking yourself. Now, in her case, why are you doing that? Because she quote unquote deserves it, what the blueprint, the programming was, and now she moves away, and the thing that she deserves, no one's giving it to her. So she's got to give it to herself. So then now she starts having rheumatoid arthritis for 30 years. Took her through a process of forgiveness to release this stuff. And we also did some acupuncture and energy work, and it went away. And the thing is, it's the most beautiful experience. And I share that as a story to show that her issue, the reason why it wasn't responding to the medications and all these other things that they were trying, the medical doctors were trying to do for her, was her problem wasn't primarily located in the physical body. It was in the mental and the emotional body. And by releasing those issues, the trickle down effect, because again, it goes from subtle to gross, external to internal, as above, so below, all that kind of stuff that we hear so much, the physical body healed because the body's above it healed. And so I just wanted to share that for our audience because it may be inspiring for them to know that there's hope. And I was just inspired to share that as a result of what you shared.
Yeah, yeah, I would love to thank you for that story. That was amazing, Jamil. Thank you so much. And that's exactly what I mean. I mean, we can heal from just about anything, you know, it's so powerful. And I want to go back to the holographic universe, that book, because there's a story in there and it's so powerful and it's an extreme case. It's an extreme case that I just want to talk about a little bit. But in that book, he talks about how there were these studies with people that were multiple personalities, and some of them had diabetes, some of them had like some people needed glasses, you know, all these like really concrete diseases or things that they had. What was so interesting is when they would change their personality, like they had cases where somebody would have diabetes, but they would change their personality and then they wouldn't have diabetes. Or they would need glasses, they would change their personality and they wouldn't need glasses. So in a way, that's kind of a blueprint of, you know, when we change our personality, we change our reality, you know. Thank you, Dr. Joe Dispenza. Like, yeah, that's it. That's the thing is that when we change at that level, our spiritual, mental, and emotional, kind of changing who we are. And then as a side effect of that, as a solution, it's like the manifestations change, our reality changes, and it's so powerful, man. Thank you for that story.
Yeah, thank you. And thank you for what you just shared. I love that part of the book. And even things like eye color would change in a second. The first time, like blue eyes and their blood sugar's like 300. And
Yeah,
then they shift personalities. And now they have brown eyes and their blood sugar's 85. And you go, it's
I know.
like, how does that, from a mainstream conventional paradigm, that's impossible. But it happens. And the fact that it happens, like Thomas said, it seems extreme. But the interesting thing is, I often tell people that magic is science not yet understood. If we recognize that if it works, it's science. But if we call it magic, like, right now, if I have my cell phone right here, it's like a 6, 7 inch box or whatever this is. And if I were to go back in time 1,000 years, 5,000 years, 10,000 years, and speak to like the royal courts of wherever I go and tell them about, give them this box and say, you can call somebody on the other side of the planet, which you don't even know what a planet is, and you don't even know there's other countries out there. And I'm going to tell them, you can talk to them, and they're going to say, how do we communicate? Like, they wouldn't say this, but like, where's the wire? Where's the connection? Oh, it's in the air. I don't see it. It's invisible. It would sound like witchcraft. I'd probably get burned. It would sound like magic. And the thing is, but now we know exactly how it works and we just call it science. But that's been kind of the human story. Something is magic, it's whatever else you call it. And then eventually you go, oh, that's just how it works. That's why I love the holographic universe book, because it really breaks down some really plausible ways that could explain why this stuff works. And a couple other things that you mentioned a little while ago that I wanted to make sure I brought some light to. You talked about surrender to the problem. And I think that's so important. And what came to mind is I remember hearing years ago when I was a teenager, people like Lance Armstrong and a handful of other people that were very well known at the time who developed cancer, they were interviewed and they said some variation of the same thing, which was cancer was the best thing that ever happened to them. And the average person might hear that, and in their mind, cancer is the worst thing that could ever happen to them. So you think and you say, how could cancer be the best thing that could ever happen to you? And they would say some variation of, it was a wake-up call. I wasn't living my life in alignment. I was taking a life for granted, whatever I was doing. Then I got face to face with my own mortality, similar to like a near-death experience. And as a result of that, my entire paradigm changed. What I thought was important changed. Like all these things changed. You know, this idea of there's a expression used ever since I've been alive, the war on. It might be the war on drugs or the war on cancer or the war on anything. The thing though is you don't create peace by going to war. You don't create, like there's an expression, whatever you resist, persist. When you push, you get pushed back. If you fight something, it's going to fight back. So in a similar way, if you notice, if you look at like the medical statistics, the war on cancer has been a dramatic fail. And the vast majority of cancers, it's the same exact prognosis now as it was like 100 years ago. There's a couple that have had massive improvements, and your recovery 50 years ago was like 10%, and now it's 80%. And that's awesome. And there's some that are the same as they were. And the ones that are the same are usually the most common ones. And so you sit there and you go, okay, maybe there's a different strategy we can use. Sometimes the drugs, the surgeries, the chemo, the radiation, whatever it is, are what you need, and they're so valuable. But sometimes you're needing more of an approach, or not more, sometimes you're needing in addition to that, or maybe in place of what we're talking about right now. And that is something I find really fascinating. I'm reminded of a story in that book. Would you want to share the story of Kribayasin? Do you remember that one?
Why don't you share it? It's not
Yeah,
coming to mind right
yeah.
now.
I'm going through the audiobook again right now, so I have it fresh. So there's this book. This is a true story for our listeners. It's from that book, The Holographic Universe. And so there was a drug called Kribayasin, and it was a cancer drug. And it came out, and I believe it was in like early, they just released it. I don't know if it was early testing, but the point was that they were releasing it, experimental probably. And so the doctor, the oncologist, gives it to this guy, but the guy is at a point where it's Friday and his cancer is so bad and his body is so broken down, he's likely not going to survive to Monday. So the doctor figured, what's the harm? Let me just give him this drug on Friday, and I'll tell him what it is. It's a cancer drug. It's supposed to be really good. That's what I'm being told. And he gives it to him. Now he goes home, he being the doctor, thinking, I'm not seeing this guy ever again. Now, the patient, though, left with so much certainty that he believed the doctor and he thought this drug is going to really help me. It's going to cure me. 3 days or 2.5 days, comes back on Monday. The nurses said his tumors looked like they were ice cubes that melted, like they were completely shrunk, like 80% gone, something like that. And then within a few days, weeks, whatever it was, completely cancer free. And then he finds out that I believe there was a medical like kind of press release. Kerbiasin doesn't work, and he somehow found that out. And within a couple of weeks or days, his cancer came back because now the belief is, oh, it didn't work. So even though he's already cured, the belief is it didn't work. Cancer comes back. The doctor then does something that he was interviewed after the book was written and said he probably wouldn't do this again. But what he did was he told the guy Kerbiasin 2.0 came out and it's even more effective. It's really it'll get rid of the cancer. And he gave it to him. The guy believed it. All of his cancer went away. It was a complete placebo. And it was like saline injection. And then the guy was cancer free for a period of time. And then the medical community came out again and said, yeah, we're sure now. Kerbiasin does not do anything. They pulled it. And then his cancer came back and then he died. But the thing was, if you track the story, what happened for him should be by the conventional mindset, not possible. And yet, any drug company will show you that they have to spend so much money, hundreds of millions, maybe even a billion plus, on these medical trials because a placebo is like 30 to 80% as effective as the drug. And even there's placebo surgeries that they do where someone's got knee issues, the other people get a knee replacement. These people, they don't know this, but they get cut open and then just sewn back up and they get a little scar. And you track them a year later and they have the same results, if not better, as the people that actually got the knee replacement. And so you sit there and you go, wait, maybe my mind and my emotions and all these things are so much more powerful than I thought they were. You got me worked up here, man. I'm excited.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Yeah, that story in that book just like you have to stop reading and think like, "Oh my God." Like, "Oh my, like how is that even possible?" But to me, like again to the holographic nature, like, the idea of that, our physical matter is 99% space. Like it's a projection of our energy, like our mind, going back to the quantum physics, let's go a little bit deeper. Like our mind is projecting the matter into a dense something we can see, something we can feel, something we can experience. And so I think that's the biggest thing, that out of all of the processes we just talked about, and the book specifically, is it comes back to the observer effect and how powerful that we can absolutely change our reality by the way we interpret it.
Mm,
That's it.
yeah,
That's it. And it's like that is when we come back to that power of, this is how I'm interpreting this. How can I shift that? When you change that interpretation, you change the whole story. When you change the story, you kind of change who you are.
yeah.
Yeah.
For our listeners, something that Thomas just said that you may find really interesting. So let's imagine you've got two versions of you side by side, kind of parallel realities. They're both you, identical, they're both you. Now, the same experience happens to both of you. So let's imagine you get a phone call, and the phone call's from someone that you care about, and it seems like they're in trouble, but then the call disconnects. Now, depending on how you interpret that, different things are going to happen in your body. In one reality, if you get really nervous and scared and fearful, you literally upregulate the chemistry in the body of stress. You create inflammation in the body. Now, in the short term, that's okay. Like all we're all designed for that. Stress is like an on and off switch. It's meant to be short term, fight or flight kind of thing. The lion's chasing you. You hopefully get away. I'm rooting for you. And then that's it. But if you are chronically running from the lion, like you're never not running from the lion, the system's not meant for that. And so now it's almost like, battery acid building up. It's like the acid nature of these stress hormones build up in the body and your body starts to break down. And so here's this thought. You have an interpretation, it leads to that. Your immune system's going to drop. If you have pain, it'll probably go up in terms of that felt experience. You might have trouble sleeping. You might be kind of frantic and not thinking clearly, but you don't know what happened because the call got disconnected. So everything you're experiencing is because of your assumptions and your thoughts and your beliefs. In the other reality, you had a reason to believe that things were likely okay. And so let's say you were more calm about it, you were more relaxed, you did what you could to call them back, but you didn't jump to any conclusions. So as a result of that, you didn't go into that fight or flight response. Your system maintained more of a neutrality to it. In that moment, your immune system stayed where it needed to be, or rather, it just stayed, let's say, functional. You didn't go into this inflammatory response, etc. And it's incredible how just your thought could do that. Now let's imagine you finally get a hold of the other person and everything was okay. Now that means they were never actually in any danger. But in one mindset, you thought they were, and your body reacted that way. And then the other one, you didn't think they were, or at least you withheld, making the assumption, and your body reacted that way. And so how interesting, that's similar to that acrobiasm story. The guy thought he got the wonder drug. He thought he was going to be cured, and he was. Does that always happen? No. But the fact that it does happen, there's something there. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Something I wanted to bring in, that we're talking about here, something you just spoke about is this idea of trauma, because this is the exact process of trauma. We have this interpretation, then we build up this story and assumption, and it's this past experience that is just replaying and replaying and replaying. And it's, we can do it in the future and call it anxiety, or we can do it in the past and call it post traumatic stress. But it's really the thing is that these significant emotional events kind of add up. And for anybody that has any snow science, this is just the best metaphor. I love it. I'm going to try and break it down really simple. So if you know snow science, then, I'm breaking this down really simply. Basically, the first snowstorm in the mountains is kind of the base for the year. Now, when the snow comes in with every storm, that layer actually starts to metamorph or change a little bit. So it changes its structure. So every snowstorm keeps building and building and building, but that layer it's changing throughout the whole winter. And then we can get different layers, like a really deep frost or a big windstorm can change the layers. So all of a sudden, there's these weak layers throughout the whole snowpack. But then there's a really big storm, and the really big storm, say, dumps like 3, 6, 7 feet overnight. All of a sudden, all these weak layers, maybe there's two or three really, really weak layers, and the bottom's really weak. That pressure just keeps adding and adding and adding until there's an avalanche. And sometimes these avalanches can step down and slide on one surface level and then step down again and step down all the way down to the base where it's this huge, huge, just life altering experience where, you know, on the surface, it seems like it's just a snowstorm, but on the bottom, it's like all of these things add up. All of these past experiences, all of these, little traumas or big traumas add up to these major, major problems. And it's actually the same thing Jamil was just talking about. It's just a story.
Yeah.
Fortunately, it's just a story. And the beautiful thing about that, not to minimize trauma, but the beautiful thing is that we can actually have a learning from the trauma and change the perspective about it and heal from it. I see it all the time.
If we could, speak to that, as I've seen, I know you've seen this over and over again, people who have been dealing with and been negatively impacted throughout their life by challenges, by traumas, these limiting beliefs, these stuck emotions, and it can actually be released so quickly for so many people. Can you speak to, from your understanding, how that process works for our audience?
Yeah, absolutely. For specifically trauma, we're gonna have to do some pretty big work, especially if there's for me, I specialize in PTSD actually with firefighters. That's what I do. I do have a lot of people that come to me with sexual trauma as well. For some reason, I work with that as well, and it's really the same process. And we have to go through a breakthrough session for something like this, which we can talk in more detail. But let's get specific on the trauma. To me, there's a root cause to the trauma. So when I see my firefighters, they'll say, there's this really big accident, or, I was in a helicopter crash, or I was burned over, or some crazy thing happened to them. But other people didn't have that trauma, that traumatic response to it. So that tells me there's something deeper. And so there's some sort of root cause. And so with post traumatic stress or trauma, we got to get to the root cause of it, the first time of that feeling. And once we release that, then we can start dealing with the actual trauma. So traditional therapy is going to say, the trauma is the biggest deal. Like we have to deal with this, when I would actually say it's a side effect. We need to go to the root cause and then deal with the trauma. And we have a very powerful, fast phobia model technique in NLP has been so powerful for trauma. I mean, it is amazing, amazing process. And my the best thing about that process is that we're triple disassociated. So we're not going into the trauma over and over like other therapies. And to me, this allows us to actually process it safely and not take it deeper. And so to me, that's the mental aspect, but I think there's actually, whenever I work with trauma, I use an energy perspective as well. In that when we have stress, like a major significant emotional event, and this is just the way I visualize it. So it's just my perspective, but it's almost as if we drop a piece of ourselves off, like a piece of energy is stuck in that time and space. and it's just spinning.
Hmm.
And it to me, it's like that's why your thoughts are ruminating. That's why you kind of go back to that story. That's why the movie's there. So that energy is just spinning and spinning and spinning. Well, if we can go back to the first time, I call it a split in consciousness. Basically, your consciousness split, right? If we can go back to the first time you split your consciousness and gather that energy, and then come along your timeline and gather all of the other energy to make you whole again, on top of the trauma release, this energy, the trauma release, and then gathering your energy back to now is absolute game changer. Absolute game changer for trauma. It's very powerful.
Yeah, you use the word that I think is so important, that healing is wholeness. And if we come from that space, I love that visual. Yeah, I got reminded of like a Voldemort Horcrux kind of thing. It's like you're like kind of like breaking up your soul into like fragments, but in this
Mhm.
case, unconsciously. But it's coming from, that's for a little shout out for the Harry Potter fans. But coming from that space of, at some level, it's like I've been like fragmented. Now I haven't actually been in my totality, but from a conscious unconscious perspective, like an awareness perspective, potentially, let's say, like you said, something happened when I was 5, something else happened when I was 11, something happened when I was born. And it's like so deep, like those layers of snow that you were talking about. And it's, yeah, there's like this fragmentation. And I find it fascinating, like you said, some people experience the same situation, but they don't have the same trauma response. And then some people, they have the situation and it completely derails their whole experience of
Yeah.
their life. And it's so challenging. And that's why I think the future, this is present right now too, but hopefully in the future, especially, healthcare is individual. It's individualized because everyone's different. There's no one size fits all. This is what you need. Like at best you can do that with like big picture stuff. Like you can tell people, hey, you probably benefit from mental and emotional release work, but what you're going to do with each person might be a little bit different because everyone's specific situation is different. There's no what's the best diet, what's the best exercise. That doesn't exist. Everyone is different. What you need is different. Why this situation impacted you as deeply as it did, there's a reason for that. And someone like Thomas in this conversation is able to go deep with you and help you figure out what that is and release what needs to be released so you can be free, so you can be whole.
Yeah, yeah. Can I share a story about this, Jamil? I think so, you know, like I said earlier, I deal with some pretty big traumas with my firefighters. And I want to tell a story about how trauma is not always so big, because I think we have this idea that, like, oh, there has to be this huge event that just, crushed me, or this thing or that. It has to be this, physical or abusive or whatever. But it doesn't actually. It really comes down to our interpretation. And so I share this story quite often because it really paints that picture of, I was doing some client work, and this person, he was really struggling with rage and like alcohol addiction, and he was on a sober streak for 10 years, but there was still like this rage issue that was a really big problem in his life. And so we did a breakthrough session, and basically when we got to the root cause of all the stuff that we talked about in that breakthrough, when we got to the root cause, it was this event where it was his birthday, maybe 3 years old, two, three, four, around there, really young. And there was a beautiful cake right in front of him. And his mom came over and cut it up. And then she took a piece of cake and like shoved it in his face, like kind of aggressively. And like he was a little bit like shocked and a little bit like kind of choking, like not choking, but took his breath away. And that seems kind of harmless. Like the mom was having fun. It was like a birthday party. It was a fun thing for her. But for him, the interpretation was absolute trauma. Like it was a traumatic experience for him. And it really did. That moment, his entire life was riddled with drug addictions and alcohol and raging and all these things because of that moment, which is wow. Like
Mhm.
that's just the interpretation. It doesn't actually have to be some sort of crazy trauma. It's actually our interpretation that's most important.
Oh, I so agree. And I really appreciate that you went there because trauma is on a spectrum. And when we can come from that space, what's traumatic to one person may not be to another. And so there's some people who hear what you just shared, and that, like you were saying, they might think as an adult and think, but the mom clearly didn't mean that and all these kind of things. But like you said, it's the interpretation. And when you're 3 or 5 or whatever the age, obviously you're not going to think the way you do now when you're listening to this podcast. And so you make it's almost like, people that I've worked with and friends of mine that I know often, let's say, if there was a divorce maybe in their family with their parents, let's say, if it was when they were young enough, not always, but sometimes, they take it they take it personally. Like mom left or dad left because of me. And like I wasn't good enough for them to stay or something. And I've seen that play out over and over again. Or a parent just leaves, like it's almost like an abandonment in that sense. Now the parent, and I've seen it happen where the parent came back 15 years later, and this person is telling me, well, as an adult, I can understand why my dad or my mom did what they did because I can now understand what was going on in their world. And they actually thought they were doing me a favor by leaving. But when you're 4 or 7 or whatever, you don't think that way. You're just thinking, somebody that I love left. What's wrong with me? And so, a lot like Thomas is saying, it could be that, or it could be your parent gave your sibling the lollipop and not you, but it's because they thought they had two and they only had one. But you internalize that as, I'm not good enough. Like that stuff happens every day. Every one of us has been through trauma. It just depends on, do we recognize it? And if we recognize it, we can do what we can to deal with it.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's what's so beautiful and powerful about the work we do, Jamil, that when we come to it in a mental emotional aspect or come to it as an adult with the timeline therapy, and we look at that event, there's this uh it's just a reframe, a realization. It's just all of a sudden like, oh, like that wasn't my anger to hold anymore. Like, oh my God, this isn't my sadness. This is my mom's sadness or whatever it is. There's some sort of realization that all of a sudden you flip the script, you change the story, and it's like dominoes all the way down to now. And it's so amazing to see because I know for me and what I've seen so many times with my clients is your body changes. Bam. Like when I released Fear and Master Pack, our training, I remember I opened my eyes and was just like, I can breathe. Like I realized I haven't been breathing for like 10 years. It's like, oh my goodness, like I can breathe. And so those are, I guess to me, the convincers, like when you do something mental, but your body changes like immediately. And I'm not saying you're going to heal your physical ailments immediately, but your body's going to change.
Yeah.
Body's going to change immediately, which is it's just, I don't know. I just love what we do so much.
Yeah.
It's so much fun.
A quote just came to mind that I'm going to preface this because it may be triggering for some people, but I would like you to just try it on as a possibility and try it on first as yourself, meaning apply it to you first. It was a quote that I heard years ago, and it goes with what you were just saying. Forgiveness is when you realize what you thought happened didn't. And so if we try it on for self first, what I thought happened, so there's what happened, and there's what I made it mean. And the what I made it mean is what is making it a trauma. And so from that space, because there's what happened, and there's people who have been through some horrendous things by my own human mind definition, like horrible, nobody should ever go through that. But at an objective level, as objective as we can be, life is happening. And then we make it mean something. And whatever we make it mean is what it becomes for us because language creates. And so the moment I can say, okay, what does that mean? Forgiveness is when what I thought happened, when I realized that what I thought happened didn't. Because in the example I gave, mom leaves and abandons the family. That, even the abandonment part's questionable, but it's like she left. That's true. Abandoning, though, is a perspective, it's a meaning. So there's what happened and what I made it mean. My mom or my dad gave the lollipop to my sibling and not me. I made that mean something. But when I get older and I realize, oh, for 10 years, for 20 years, for 30 years, I believe I'm not good enough because mom withheld a lollipop from me because I didn't deserve it. And then you realize that's not what happened at all. And then you go, oh, so the entire story is based on a fabrication. And that's why it can release so quickly because it wasn't real to begin with.
Yeah.
And so, and I say that though with all the love and respect in the world to our listeners, because some of you that are listening have been through things that I can't even imagine. Some of you have been through things that are really painful, really challenging, and I don't mean any disrespect. I do come from a space though of wanting to empower and to support you and to stepping into your power and creating the life that you want to live. And if you are in prison right now because of a story that happened 20 years ago, 5 years ago, even 5 minutes ago, it's not happening now. And so the more there's a Rumi quote, a Sufi poet, and from like 800 years ago, he says, "Why do you remain in prison when the door is wide open?" And that's why this work that Thomas and I do, I also just love it so much because if someone's willing to let things go, to be in this moment and not be in the past, I often tell people the past let you go a long time ago. But if you keep bringing it back into the present moment, you're going to keep reliving it. You're going to keep re-experiencing the trauma because it's like the experience happened once and then you've re-traumatized yourself hundreds of times, thousands of times every time you bring it back into your awareness. But if you do it this way, there's a freedom that can be experienced that I've seen, that Thomas has shared, that he's seen over and over and over again. And again, I say that with the utmost love and respect for you because without knowing you personally, I love you. I love you as a fellow soul, as a fellow human being on the journey. I know that you've got goals and dreams and you've got fears and challenges and insecurities just like me and just like everyone else who's listening. I know that you've been through some things just like me and we all have our stuff. But can we help each other? Can we rise above what we've been through? There's an expression like make your mess your message. It's an empowering way of saying take what you've been through and use it as fuel to get where you want to go. Use it as fuel to make you stronger versus crumble because of what you've been through. Like there's people in the world, no matter what it is, who've taken the most atrocious acts that have been committed to them and they've turned it into something so impactful and so beautiful. And that doesn't mean you have to do that, but it just creates the possibility that that could happen. And if you're willing to step into that, you've now opened that possibility to you. You've opened it up that it could happen for you. I just want to share that.
Thank you so much. And something that came up while you're talking is like you said, these major things, especially, I think for a lot of people, like some major traumas like abuse really is like, how could I ever forgive that? But I think actually a key to some of this stuff is with any trauma or any healing is actually connecting to a universal love. We can call it God, we can call it spirit, we can call it universe, doesn't matter. It's your source. But something that I've witnessed in my sessions that are quite common is that the client often gets into a mystical state. And what I mean by that is there's a oneness, there's an awe of the universe, or there's some sort of spiritual experience that brings them to a higher level than they never thought possible. It's like a Kundalini awakening or, waking up, really. I mean, a lot of people wake up in our sessions, honestly. And to me, the thing that really ties us together is there's in that mystical state, there's a realization of unconditional love. And there's this, I could forgive anything because God or spirit forgives me. And I think that's one of the things when we reconnect to that, you know, I guess more of a Native American perspective is that, at a certain point in our lives, we have to let go of our parents and connect to Mother Earth and Father Sky. And those are our archetypes. Those are the beings or the energies that we should be looking up to and integrating that into our life, not our physical parents, but our spiritual parents, or connecting to that inside yourself, right?
Mm. When you said, actually, I'm going to wait on that one just because there's one more thing I want to ask you before I get to that. We've talked a lot about the mental, the emotional. A few times in the beginning of our conversation, we mentioned the energetic. For our listeners who aren't familiar with energy work, they're not familiar with what that even means. Could you give like a basic understanding how it occurs for you to explain this is what energy work is?
Yeah. Yeah, that's beautiful. You know, I'm going to start out really simple or things that people have seen before, like yoga has the chakra system. Okay, that's our energy body. Chinese medicine has the meridian systems and the organs. This would be another aspect of our energy body. And I actually like both of them. They're both a beautiful system, and there's other systems out there, right? There's our aura and all these things. But really, if we can think about our energetics or the physics of our body, we could think of it more of a science way. It doesn't matter. But with energy work, it's not so much about the story or the emotions or the feeling. It's more about the vibration and the frequency and the boundaries of that energy. And so a lot of times these things that we've been talking about with, this limiting belief or this trauma or this thing, it's that from a energy perspective, there's a impact to the energy field. Like that trauma is there at an energy level, or that belief is there. We can say there's a blockage in a meridian or a blockage in the chakra somewhere that's creating it, something in the physical body, even. So when we do energy work, it's really about just clearing the energy and clearing the vibration, the frequencies, and raising the vibration. Now, I know that sounds really woo woo, but it's really about basically getting in touch with that energy, focusing on it, becoming aware of it, and letting it go and sending it to the light. I mean, that's as simple as we can get, is sending it into the light, bringing awareness to it, and really being thankful for it. We have a very powerful process with higher self therapy that is extremely effective for so many different things. But in that process, we become aware of the problem at an unconscious level. Then we light it up in the body. Like, the body keeps the score, right? It's in the body, it's in the neurology, it's in your nervous system. So we actually activate it and light it up and do the problem. And then the highest self just takes it, it dissolves it and installs a new energy. So that's the thing about energy, is it's creation or creating, transforming, and completing. So with energy work, we're just really trying to complete the circuit. We're trying to complete the energy so it can reach its karma or reach its purpose so it can be transformed. That's really it.
Yeah, I love the explanation. And something that came up in my mind when you were sharing it is, so to give our listeners, let's say, a visualization of frequency and vibration to make it like real for you. If you go on YouTube, some of you may have heard of this, some of you may haven't. You type in cymatics. It's C like cat, Y-M-A-T-I-C-S. And it's essentially using sound waves, sound frequencies, vibrations, and there'll be like a plate and the speaker is below it. And on the plate, they might put water or they might put sand or sugar or something like that. And it's randomly dispersed on the plate. And then they play the frequency. So now everything on that plate is vibrating at that vibration, at that frequency, because this is physics talk. Again, it's not woo-woo, like Thomas was saying. And so when we come from that space, you watch, I'm going to make up a number here. So it's like 424 hertz or something, and they play that. And immediately, everything on the plate changes into this beautiful geometric shape. And then let's say it holds it as the sound is going. And then they play like 444 hertz. And immediately it changes configuration to a different shape. Now you look at it on the plate and you think, oh, that's really cool. Now, when you see water doing that, why is that applicable to you? Because depending on how old you are, your body is anywhere from 55 to 70% water, and maybe even more. And so now imagine a certain vibration, a certain frequency, whether through sound or through light or through energy work, is inputted, let's say, into the system. Your system is exposed to that. It's like all the water molecules in your body changing to these shapes. And healing occurs at, to keep it simple, higher vibrations, higher frequencies. Disease occurs at lower vibrations. And so there's a beautiful there's a beautiful book. I believe it's called, there's a few. It's one is the body, I think it's called The Body Electric, and the other one will come to me in a moment. Healing is Voltage, that's the book. And so when you come from that space, you realize that physically, a cell, it's meant to, not to make it too scientific, but just to have our listeners be on the same page. A cell is meant to be negatively charged. And when a cell gets damaged, in order for it to repair, it has to become even more negatively charged. But if your system doesn't have what it needs to support, let's say, the holding of that negative charge, it begins to become more positive. And eventually it becomes neutral, and then it becomes positive. And when it becomes positive enough, it becomes a cancerous cell. There's no cancerous cell that's negatively charged. They're all positively charged. And so coming from that space, how can we keep the negative charge? How can we help the body to repair? That's another way of saying energy. And so, we're just scratching the surface, obviously, and we're not going to touch on all of it, but it's energy work is so fascinating. And, I grew up so unaware of these things until I was 3 years ago, like 30 years old, that my whole life changed when I got exposed to this stuff. And it's so real. It's not even funny. Like it's magical how real it is. And when people are willing to not even believe, show up and just be open. Like be skeptical all you want, try it. And when you try it and it works and you go, oh, okay, there's something here. Then your whole life belief gets challenged, and then you get woken up to a whole new way of living.
Yeah, something I want to touch on here, Jamil, is the cymatics, and the way to me where this really ties all of this together is, our vibration actually comes a lot to our words, what we speak. Of there, it starts what we're thinking, but then we speak it, and that this is like the word, as above, so below. It's the word of creation coming out of you, right? In a spiritual sense. But when you speak, it's cymatics in your body. You're
Yeah.
speaking that, you're having that vibration. And so this comes back to our stories in our mind. We change our vibration, we change the stories in our mind, all the way down to we change the physical. So it's just another example of how, to me, our words, our language, that's why NLP, neuro linguistic programming, is so powerful, because it comes back to what's the story you're telling?
Yeah.
How does that story work? What's the process? How do you do that? Like, it's an investigative process. What's the words you're using, right? And I think, to me, kind of to tie this in as well, is like the book I love so much on this is Power versus Force, and the map of consciousness, and the science is there. We won't go into the science too much, but a lot of muscle testing. So the whole process, the way they develop this chart, it's this beautiful chart that goes from guilt at around 20, I think, all the way up to enlightenment at about 1,000. And they did a lot of body testing, saying, okay, I'm guilt, or I'm this, I'm that. And they did this long scientific approach to actually make this map of consciousness for the human body. Very fascinating. And actually, I use this a lot with my clients. Like, okay, like where are you starting at first? Are you at a 20? Are you a 50? Are you at 100? Acceptance, neutral, more of a love or joy or peace. And the more release work we do, the higher vibration we go, and actually the higher on the chart we get.
Yeah.
It's so beautiful. And of course, we're going to have days, fear or anger comes up, and we're all human. We all have those days. But consistently, you're going to be going up that chart consistently and holding that charge, if you will, like you said, holding that more and more and more, and becoming more resilient and climbing that consciousness, basically,
Yeah, man, I love that. And it's that question. It's not, like you said, it's not expecting perfection. I'm always going to be a certain way, but it's like, where do I live emotionally on a day-to-day basis? Where do I live most of the time? And like Thomas is saying, when you notice that number, that word, that quality, that whatever going up and up and up, you're spiraling up. Life is getting better. And the more you do the work on yourself, the more that happens. And the less you bounce back down to things that used to be your old home. And then the other thing that comes to mind when you say, I love that when you say cymatics through the voice, for sure. And there's a famous book in the personal development space. A lot of people maybe have read it who are listening. It's called The Four Agreements by Don Miguel Ruiz. And he's a Toltec shaman from Mexico. And the first agreement is called be impeccable with your word. It's not just like don't lie. It's a part of what Thomas just said. The way you speak, it's like you're casting a spell. Think about it like that. How do you create a word? You spell it. But in like the paradigm of magic and Harry Potter and stuff like that, a magician, a wizard, a sorcerer, a witch, what do? They cast spells. And what happens when you cast a spell? Like something happens in the world. But when you speak a word, you spell it. You're casting that spell over yourself. The most powerful words in the human language are I am. Whatever you follow I am with is real for you. And so when you say I am not, I can't, I am, I won't, or what, not I won't, but the other ones, you get it. When you come from that space, the spell you cast over you, the vibration, the frequency, all these things are depressing. They lower you on that scale of consciousness that Thomas is alluding to. And so, yeah, it's a million rabbit holes we can go down. Something that you said earlier that I wanted to definitely address. You mentioned, I think it was like a Mother Earth and Father Sky. And in the beginning of our conversation, you mentioned shamanic work. I just made a word up, shamanic, shamanic work. And I know that you support a lot of clients and people groups in plant medicine experiences. I know you do retreats and things in Mexico. For those of us not as familiar, can you share, what's the purpose of plant medicine? I know they're all different, there's many types, but big picture, what's the purpose of plant medicine? Who's it for? What can people expect in these type of experiences?
Yeah, for me, I think I've been evolving as I encounter these processes. I've been evolving my thinking around this, and it's a beautiful tool. And I think there's a time and place for it in somebody's journey. And I think nowadays it's becoming maybe overused actually in a way to spiritual bypass. But that's I guess the caution I would start with is like, are we actually doing the integration work? Are we actually doing the work in the physical, or are we chasing something? And so we have to be careful to start with there. But they are very powerful plants that, to me, what I've seen, there's at a certain level when somebody has severe post-traumatic stress or a severe illness, they need a team. They need a medical doctor, they need an acupuncturist, they need a herbalist, they need somebody like me and Jamil, or Jamil's a naturopath. They need a, a team of people. And so to me, when things get really complex, I feel like the plant medicines are extremely powerful, especially when we prepare with something like a breakthrough session where really clearing the unconscious mind. Because, classically, we've all heard the things on the internet, right? Where you go into a plant medicine experience and you have to kind of fight the devil or go through the demons. And you have to go all through all this baggage work. You're basically clearing the shadow so then you can really see the light, you know? To me, when we actually do a breakthrough session first, we do all that work first. So then the person has a plant medicine experience that's in the light. And this really allows them to, again, coming back to mystical states, it brings them into a state of oneness with God, with spirit, whatever we want to call it. And this is the healing. In my perspective, the plant medicines are just a show. The real thing is putting you into a mystical state that brings you into oneness with the universe. A it's you can't even put it to words. I'm struggling with words. It's like you become God, or you have an experience of God. And oftentimes the team I work with will call it, they had their nirvana, like they had that experience. They had that breakthrough where it's spiritual and it's a mystical state, but it's so profound that they can't think the same ever again.
Hmm.
That's the key. That's the key, is precipitating that kind of experience where, to me, I think the plant medicines, what they're really good at is actually changing the conscious mind, the ego, the identity. Like, really, if we're really stuck in a certain way of thinking, we can really have a profound effect on really changing the conscious mind and the way we think about ourselves, which is sometimes we need that. Sometimes we need that major slap in the face to wake up. It's not that different.
Yeah, it's amazing. I know many people in my life that have utilized these different medicines throughout the world. And what I commonly hear is that the experience is profound in a variety of different ways.
Yeah. Yeah. It's the integration is really important because and it's something it's going through the communities more and more, but it's something that's not focused on enough. And actually, you know, I guess to share more of my thoughts about this, I think the therapy assisted programs that are starting, like in Oregon or these other West Coast states, I think is a really cool idea, but I'm not sure the therapists have the shaman aspect. Like, can you work with the demon? Because you might have to. Can you actually clear the energy? Because you're opening portals, basically, and we need someone that's a shaman. You can't do this by yourself. You shouldn't do it with a therapist. That's just my own personal perspective. You need both. You need therapy and a shaman because you're stepping into both worlds. And I think it's when we can integrate those and bring the integration, because what can happen is we have such a profound mystical experience that when you go back home, back to your life, it's like, who am I? I don't even know who I am anymore. Some people might get home and look in the mirror and be like, I don't even know who that is. It's a complete wiping the slate clean it can be. And so the integration can be really hard.
Hmm.
The experience can be really powerful, but the integration is going to be a lot more work than maybe we thought it was going to be. Yeah.
Yeah, I really appreciate that because I know you have a lot of experience supporting people with this. And for our listeners, you're hearing it from somebody who's seen it over and over and over again. And so it's not something to take lightly. I know you and I have discussed at various times in the past, there's some people that they're taking plant medicines all the time, but at such a frequency that are they actually giving it the reverence and learning the lessons and doing all these things, or are they just kind of maybe abusing it?
Yeah. Yeah. And I think at a certain level, I think plant medicines are really important for your journey, for anybody's journey. And I think there's a certain level where it's teaching you how to do it.
Yeah.
So at a certain time, like you should be able to do that psychedelic state with no medicine. You don't need it. You actually don't need it. You really do not need it at all. You can do it yourself or do it with somebody like me and Jamil, where we know how to activate this with energy, right? That's more the Huna perspective. But I think to me, it's about teaching your unconscious mind how to do it with the plant medicines and then practicing. That's actually the higher level practice.
Yeah. Something that I love that you shared, I think it's so important as a reminder, is the importance of the community of a team. And I think,
Hmm.
I mentioned earlier, there's no what's the one diet or what's the one this, what's the one pill.
Yeah.
It's what is my body, physical, emotional, mental, spiritual, needing right now at this phase of my journey, depending on what I've been through, all these kind of things. There's a level of support that you're not going to get all of it from one person.
Yeah.
And if we can spread that out and have people that know what they're doing, now you've got this camaraderie, you've got this teamwork where it's like the one of my favorite quotes. I've shared it on the podcast several times. The rising tide lifts all boats. And now it's like you have all these different practitioners and the tide is raising and the tide is your health, physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual, because everything's being addressed that needs to be addressed. When people tell me, oh, I tried everything and it didn't work, A, I know you didn't try everything because no one did. But B, it means that whatever you did, either you didn't go deep enough, you didn't use enough of it, or it wasn't appropriate and you didn't get to the root cause. Like if it's not working, it's because whatever's causing it, you're not getting to that. When you get rid of the root cause, it goes away. It might
Yeah.
take time, but it goes away, or at least it gets better. If there's no improvement, you haven't figured it out yet. And the
Yeah.
beauty is that there's enough practitioners out there with a variety of expertise and things of that nature that as long as you're looking, it's likely you'll find. If you stop looking because you buy into a belief that there's nothing out there, like nothing can help, that goes back to the cymatics and like, what are you speaking over your life?
Mhm.
Like, what's the prison of you that you put yourself in of this is just the way that it is? And the moment you say that, it is the way that it is for you, but it doesn't have to be that way. And so, before we wrap things up, is there a comment you wanted to share there?
Yeah, I want to have a go back. Uh
Yeah, please go ahead.
Something that I think well, of course we need more science. I always say that, but I what I have seen and especially in the veteran community, I think the plant medicines are extremely important for like TBIs and helping overcome that because it can be with a severe TBI or sorry, the
Traumatic brain
traumatic
injury.
brain injury. Thank you. uh, it can be kind of hard to get in touch with the unconscious mind. So it can actually limit some of the work that me and Jamil do. So there's a TBI on board. We need some other modalities like a hyperbolic chamber can be really helpful, or that's where like microdosing or other plant medicines can actually repair the neurology. And then we can do something like a breakthrough session. So there's times when these things are actually like, yeah, we need to do that.
Yeah.
And actually, when we look at brain scans like PTSD and a TBI, they kind of look the same. It's really interesting from my understanding. So, like, there's actually parts of the brain that shut off with PTSD. So, that's why the veterans are having this profound experience and healing with these things is what I just talked about. Yeah.
Yeah. You just reminded me of, whether it's in business or in any area of your life, there's tools, there's the
Hmm.
practitioner, like the one using the tool, but then there's, like the timing. Is this the right time for this tool?
Yeah.
And if you get the order wrong, it's not going to work. And so it's like if somebody is metaphorically crawling, because that's the stage that they're in, and you show up with a tool that's useful when somebody's able to sprint, that tool is going to fail that person, or it might overwhelm the body because it can't handle it yet.
Hmm.
But it would have been the perfect tool when they were at the point where they could sprint. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
awesome. And
Yeah.
so I would love to wrap up with the last few questions here. If our conversation right now, Thomas, was your last opportunity to speak to the hearts of everyone listening, to share the message that's on your heart, that's on your soul to deliver, what would you want to make sure you left people with?
Mm. I think there's the life we're living and the life we want to be living sometimes. And whatever that disconnect is, to me, it comes down to like our purpose. Are you living your purpose? I know when I got or started living my life based on my purpose of helping other people, everything changed for me. And so I guess I just want to share that of, whatever that light is, because we all have a unique gift to the world to give, to share, to be. Just step into your light. Just step into your light. Don't be afraid to step into your light and be who you are, because who you are is an amazing, beautiful manifestation of God.
What a beautiful way to wrap up. Thank you for that, Thomas. Is there anything that you're working on or working towards right now that's exciting you that you'd like to share with our audience?
Oh wow. I think right now my time is pretty occupied with college and classes, and I'm working towards, acupuncture school and all those things. So, and the other thing I'm in the middle of training right now is becoming a qigong instructor. And so that has been just so game changing for my own energy system. I'm just so excited to be mixing the qigong and all the energy work we do and all the applications for self healing. And I think the biggest thing I've learned is qigong is the highest form of Chinese medicine. And so it's really really powerful. And so I'm excited to be sharing that with the world pretty soon, very
Mm,
soon.
I love that. Yeah. I'm excited to experience that as well in you. And I know that you've authored many books. I know you've got this beautiful soundtrack that you created that I got to experience on Spotify, assuming it's still there. For our listeners who want to learn more about you, where to connect with you, possibly work with you if you have the space, or maybe just pick up some books and anything like that, how's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, the best way is to go to mountainmindtricks.com and you can find me there. You can find all the books, all the things. You can also find me on Mountain Mind Tricks on Instagram, and then Amazon. You can just Google Thomas Wurm or on the search bar in Amazon. My latest book is Seven Ways to Medicine, which is a very powerful book just about the elements, the laws of the universe, just really coming into we spoke a little bit about Mother Earth and Father Sky. This is really the seven directions that comes from a Native American perspective and how each direction is this archetype and this energy and how to, I guess the best way to put it is that book teaches you how to pray and how to really put a thoughtful, powerful prayer with the elements out into the world.
Yeah. As somebody who's read the book, I highly recommend that people check it out.
Uh,
Beautiful, beautiful read.
yeah, and that book comes with some guided meditations that I can, tell you from my heart. Uh, wow, the meditations will change your life. It's a healing process. Just the meditations, they go hand in hand with the book, but the guided meditations on Spotify, if you search 7 Ways to Medicine, you'll find it. Highly recommend that.
Yeah. And if anyone's trying to type that in right now, 7 is the number, correct? It's not the word.
Yep.
Perfect. So, Thomas, thank you so, so much for your time, your energy, your attention, your willingness to just share who you are and how you show up in the world. And I have so much love and respect for you, and I really appreciate you taking the time to be here.
Oh, thank you so much, Jamil. I love you too, brother. It's been an amazing journey together, and I'm so happy to be here, share time with you, share time with your audience, and just thank you for this amazing conversation.
Thank you, man. You're so welcome. And so I'll have all the links to everything Thomas shared in the show notes below. And if this conversation resonated with you, my first recommendation is listen to it again. You're likely going to get more from it the second and third and fourth time and beyond. Because every time you listen to it, you're not the same person you were the previous time. There's a level of understanding and clarity that you reach with each playthrough that you just get more and more from it. So you can mine the gold over and over again. Please share this with at least one person. Share it far and wide if you'd like to. Please leave a review, whether it's on Apple, Spotify, if it's a YouTube comment, whatever it is, helps the algorithm, helps more people hear the message, hear these wonderful conversations, and you can play a part in helping the ripple effect of changing as many lives as possible. I call this conversation and this podcast, Transformation Starts Today. And I call it that because I find that most people's favorite day to change their life is tomorrow. And that's why they stay stuck. But you can be different. You can take new action. You can implement what Thomas and I discussed in this conversation today and begin shifting your life. Thomas was just saying there's the life you're living now and there's the life you want to live. What's the bridge? What's the gap? Making a new decision consistently and acting on it. Make that choice right now. The new me is here. And you do that and the rest of your life changes in so many beautiful ways. All my love to you and wishing you and your loved ones the best. And I look forward to our next conversation. Take care, everyone. Thank you for being with us today. If this conversation served you, it would mean a lot if you left a review and shared this with anyone who may benefit. An extraordinary life without regret is available to you now. Choose it. It's your time.